The sound of the slap echoed louder than the string quartet playing Pachelbel's canon in D. My glasses flew off my face and shattered on the polished marble floor of the Magnolia Grand Hotel ballroom. 130 guests fell silent, conversations dying mid-sentence, champagne glasses frozen halfway to lips. I stood motionless, my left cheek burning, not from the physical pain, but from the humiliation that spread through my body like wildfire. "Give me the keys to the apartment, Grace," Brielle screamed, her perfectly manicured hand still raised in the air as if daring me to disobey. The enormous diamond on her ring finger caught the light from the crystal chandeliers overhead, momentarily blinding me. "That place belongs to us now." I blinked, struggling to focus without my glasses. Through the blur, I searched for my son Nathan, my only child, the boy I'd raised alone with every ounce of love I possessed after his father died. He stood beside his new bride, saying nothing, not even flinching, not stepping forward to defend his mother. The silence in the ballroom was deafening. I could feel the weight of every stare, the collective intake of breath, the discomfort of witnesses to a public humiliation. My hands trembled as I bent down to pick up the broken pieces of my glasses, the frames twisted beyond repair, just like my heart. But something inside me, something that had been dormant for too long, suddenly snapped back into place. Without a word, I straightened my spine, smoothed down the modest blue dress I'd saved for months to buy, and reached into my worn leather purse. I pulled out my phone and dialed the one number I had prayed I would never need to use. "Thomas," I said quietly, my voice steadier than I expected. "It's time." I turned away from the spectacle I'd become, from my son's shocked face, from Brielle's victorious smirk, and walked with measured steps toward the ballroom doors. No running, no tears, just dignity in every footfall. Behind me, I heard Brielle's mother stage whisper, "She's always been dramatic," followed by nervous tittering from their side of the family. I heard Nathan's uncertain voice calling, "Mom?" But he made no move to follow me. In the ornate hallway outside the ballroom, I leaned against a marble column and took my first full breath in what felt like hours. The wedding planner appeared at my side, concern etched across her professional features. "Mrs. Whitmore, is everything okay? Do you need assistance?" I looked at her kind face and managed a small smile. "No, thank you. But someone will be arriving shortly. Please escort him directly to the reception when he gets here." "Of course," she nodded, confusion evident but discretion prevailing. I found a quiet alcove and sat on a velvet bench, gathering my thoughts as I waited. The journey that had led to this moment hadn't begun today. It had started 3 years ago, when Nathan first brought Brielle home to meet me. I closed my eyes, remembering that first encounter, her critical gaze as she scanned my modest apartment in Savannah's Victorian district, the way she touched my furniture with the tip of her finger as if checking for dust, her backhanded compliments. "Oh, this place is so quaint. Reminds me of my grandmother's house before we moved her to assisted living." Nathan had been different then. Eager to please her, yes, but still connected to me. Still the thoughtful boy I'd raised. We'd been through so much together after losing his father when Nathan was just 7. 20 years of building a life, brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice. I had worked 2 jobs, elementary school teacher by day, bookkeeper for local businesses by night, to ensure he had everything he needed. College tuition, a reliable car, emotional support. We didn't have much, but we had each other, and I thought that was enough. What I hadn't told Nathan, what I'd kept private for reasons that now seemed foolish, was that we weren't as financially strained as our lifestyle suggested. His father, my beloved James, had made some remarkably prescient investments before his death. The life insurance combined with those investments had grown substantially over the years. I chose to live modestly, save carefully, and ensure Nathan's future was secure. Perhaps my mistake was in sheltering him too much from the realities of money. Or perhaps I simply didn't want wealth to define us the way it defined families like Brielle's. My phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. "Parking now. 5 minutes." I took a deep breath and stood, checking my reflection in a gilded mirror on the wall. Without my glasses, I looked different, more vulnerable somehow. The red mark on my cheek was fading, but the memory of that slap would be forever imprinted on my soul. 30 minutes after I'd walked out of the reception, the doors of the ballroom opened. Thomas Sinclair, my attorney for over 20 years, walked in with the confidence of a man who knew his purpose. Silver-haired and imposing in a tailored charcoal suit, he carried a leather portfolio containing documents that would change everything. From my position near the doorway, I Could see the reception had attempted to recover its celebratory atmosphere. The band was playing, though few were dancing. Clusters of guests whispered among themselves, no doubt dissecting the earlier drama. Brielle and Nathan stood near the elaborate 5-tier cake, her arm possessively looped through his, her head held high as if nothing had happened. Thomas spotted me and nodded once before, proceeding directly to the center of the room. He tapped a knife against a champagne flute, the clear ring cutting through the murmured conversations. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his authoritative voice requiring no microphone. "I apologize for the interruption. My name is Thomas Sinclair, attorney for Grace Whitmore." The room fell silent once more. Nathan's face drained of color. Brielle's expression hardened, her perfect makeup doing nothing to mask her sudden anxiety. I stepped forward, rejoining the room that had witnessed my humiliation. But this time I wasn't entering as a victim. I was walking back in as a woman reclaiming her power, and what happened next would change all of our lives forever. To understand how we arrived at that devastating moment at the Magnolia Grand Hotel, you need to know what happened in the 3 years leading up to it. Nathan met Brielle Adams at a charity gala in Atlanta. He had recently graduated from law school and landed a position at a respectable mid-sized firm. I was so proud of him. My son, the first in our family to become an attorney. When he called to tell me about the beautiful marketing executive he'd met, his voice contained an excitement I hadn't heard since he was a child opening Christmas presents. "She's amazing, Mom," he gushed over the phone. "Smart, ambitious, connected. Her father owns half of Buckhead, practically." 2 months later, Nathan drove down to Savannah to introduce us. I spent days preparing, cleaning my already clean apartment, cooking his favorite meals, even splurging on new curtains. For the guest room, I wanted everything to be perfect, wanted Brielle to feel welcome in our modest home. They arrived in her gleaming white Mercedes convertible. Nathan carried their overnight bags while Brielle surveyed the tree-lined street with an expression I couldn't quite read. When she stepped into my foyer, I extended my arms for an embrace, but she offered a stiff cheek kiss instead. "Grace," she said, using my first name immediately, though I hadn't offered it. "Nathan's told me so much about you." I led them to the living room, where I'd prepared a simple afternoon tea with homemade scones. Brielle perched on the edge of my sofa as if afraid it might contaminate her designer dress. "This neighborhood is certainly historic," she commented, emphasizing the word in a way that made it sound like a polite substitute for decrepit. "Do you feel safe here, living alone?" "Mom's apartment is in the best part of the Victorian district," Nathan interjected quickly. "It's actually quite valuable property now." I noticed how he glanced at Brielle when he said this, seeking her approval. It was the first glimpse of a pattern that would become increasingly familiar. Nathan, positioning himself between us, constantly translating one woman to the other. "It's not just a house. It's my home," I said simply. "I've been here for 15 years. I know every shopkeeper on the block, every neighbor. It's a real community." Brielle's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Community is nice, but security is essential. Nathan and I are looking at gated communities in Atlanta." That weekend set the tone for our relationship. Brielle made it clear that my life, my choices, my very existence were somehow inadequate. She questioned everything. Why I still worked part-time at the school when I could retire, why I drove a 10-year-old Honda, why I shopped at farmers markets instead of Whole Foods. Each criticism was wrapped in concern, each judgment delivered with a smile. And with each passing visit, Nathan grew more distant, more apologetic about my perceived shortcomings. 6 months after they began dating, Nathan called with news of their engagement. I congratulated him, of course. What else could I do? I wanted him to be happy. But when I asked about wedding plans, his hesitation was palpable. "Brielle's parents are handling most of it," he explained. They're covering the costs." "I'd like to contribute," I offered, thinking of the separate account I'd maintained for just this purpose. "It's important to me." "That's sweet, Mom, but the Adamses have a certain vision. The Magnolia Grand, 7-course dinner, string quartet. It's going to be featured in Atlanta magazine." I swallowed my hurt. "I see. Well, I'd still like to help with something. Perhaps the rehearsal dinner?" His relief was audible. "That would be perfect. Something small, intimate. Brielle's dad is inviting some important clients to the wedding, so the rehearsal could be just family." But even that modest plan was eventually undermined. 2 months before the wedding, Brielle called me directly. A rare occurrence. "Grace, about the rehearsal dinner," she began without preamble. "We've decided to move it to the Magnolia Grand as well. The wedding planner feels it creates a more cohesive experience for out-of-town guests. I've already reserved the garden at Forsyth Park, I replied, trying to keep disappointment from my voice. It's Nathan's favorite place in Savannah. Yes, well, Nathan's priorities have evolved. The reservation has been canceled. You'll receive an updated itinerary. Her tone softened slightly. We still appreciate your offer to contribute financially to that portion of the celebration. I was being dismissed from any meaningful participation while still expected to pay. It was humiliating, but I agreed, for Nathan. As the wedding approached, Brielle's visits to Savannah increased, but not to see me. I would receive texts from neighbors spotting her in the district, sometimes with her mother, sometimes with strangers carrying clipboards. 3 weeks before the wedding, my neighbor Joseph knocked on my door. Joseph was a retired professor who had become my close friend over the years, watching out for me like the brother I never had. Grace, he said gravely, I thought you should know. Your future daughter-in-law was here today with what looked like a real estate agent. They were outside, measuring your front steps and taking photos of the building. Ice formed in the pit of my stomach. Are you certain? Positive. I heard her say something about pre-war details and excellent investment potential. When I approached and introduced myself as your neighbor, they left quickly. That night, I called Nathan and asked directly if Brielle had plans for my apartment. His uncomfortable laugh confirmed my fears before his words did. Mom, she's just enthusiastic about historic properties. She thinks your apartment has incredible potential with the right renovations. Actually, we've been wanting to talk to you about your future plans. My future plans? I repeated slowly. Yes. Retirement. Brielle knows this wonderful active living community outside Atlanta. It would be closer to us, and you wouldn't have to worry about maintaining an old building. The conversation ended with vague reassurances that nothing would happen without my consent. But that night, I contacted Thomas Sinclair. We had a long, difficult discussion about wills, trusts, and protections. The next time I saw Nathan and Brielle was at the wedding rehearsal. Brielle pulled me aside during cocktail hour, champagne flute in hand. Grace, she whispered conspiratorially, I've been meaning to ask, do you have a spare key to your place? Just in case of emergencies. Since you're all alone down there. I looked into her calculating eyes and made my decision. I'm sorry, Brielle. I don't give out spare keys. It's a security precaution. Her smile tightened. Nathan had a key once, didn't he? Yes, but he returned it when he moved to Atlanta. She leaned closer, her perfume overwhelming. Well, family should have access to family homes, don't you think? After all, we'll need to check on you as you get older. The condescension in her voice made my resolve even stronger. That night, I finalized my plans with Thomas. We arranged for him to attend the wedding reception as my guest and to bring the necessary documentation if needed. I prayed it wouldn't be needed. I prayed that Nathan would remember who he was, who we were together. I prayed that I was overreacting. But as Brielle's slap still stung my cheek and Thomas Sinclair stood in the center of that ballroom with my revised will in his hands, I knew my prayers had gone unanswered, and the truth that was about to be revealed would change everything. Thomas Sinclair stood in the center of the ballroom, commanding attention without raising his voice. The leather portfolio in his hands suddenly seemed like the most important object in the room. I have here, he announced, the updated will and testament of Grace Whitmore, notarized and finalized 3 days ago. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Brielle's father, Robert Adams, a tall, imposing man with the practiced charm of old money, stepped forward. This is hardly appropriate, he said with forced joviality. We're celebrating a wedding. Legal matters can wait for business hours. Thomas smiled thinly. Under normal circumstances, I would agree. However, when my client is physically assaulted and publicly humiliated at her son's wedding reception, circumstances are no longer normal. Robert's face flushed. He turned to Nathan, clearly expecting him to intervene. My son stood frozen, looking between his new wife, her powerful father, and the attorney who had known him since childhood. Nathan, Brielle hissed, make this stop. But Thomas continued, unperturbed. Mrs. Whitmore has authorized me to disclose certain provisions of her will in response to the unfortunate events that transpired here tonight. He removed a document from his portfolio and adjusted his reading glasses. First, let me clarify something that seems to be causing confusion. The property at 217 Abercorn Street in Savannah's Victorian district is owned outright by Grace Whitmore. There is no mortgage. There is no lien. There are no co-owners. This property, contrary to whatever assumptions may have been made, is not and has never been promised to Nathan Whitmore or to any future spouse of his. Brielle made a sound of disbelief. Her mother, a willowy woman who had maintained a polite distance from me throughout the engagement, placed a restraining hand on her daughter's arm. Furthermore, Thomas continued, Mrs. Whitmore has included a specific clause regarding coercion or abuse. I'll read it verbatim. Should any beneficiary of this will attempt to gain control of my assets through manipulation, coercion, physical intimidation, or elder abuse of any kind, said beneficiary shall be immediately and permanently disqualified from receiving any portion of my estate. The weight of his words settled over the room. Nathan took a half step forward, his face pale. Mom, he began, but I couldn't meet his eyes. Thomas held up a hand. I'm not finished. In light of tonight's events, and in accordance with Mrs. Whitmore's previously established instructions, I have executed a series of transfers effective immediately. He turned a page in the document. The entirety of Mrs. Whitmore's investment portfolio, liquid assets, and real estate holdings have been transferred into an irrevocable trust. This trust will now fund the James Whitmore Foundation for Dignity in Aging, named after Mrs. Whitmore's late husband. Gasps echoed around the ballroom. Nathan swayed slightly, reaching for the back of a chair to steady himself. Mom, he tried again, louder this time. What investments? What holdings? I don't understand. It was the first time I had allowed myself to look directly at him since returning to the ballroom. The confusion in his eyes was genuine, and it broke my heart all over again. I had kept so much from him, thinking I was protecting him from the burden of wealth, from becoming the kind of person who valued money above compassion. Instead, I had left him vulnerable to those who did. Your father was wiser than I ever gave him credit for, I said quietly, my voice somehow carrying through the silent room. The modest life we lived was a choice, Nathan, not a necessity. I wanted you to value work, integrity, kindness, not inheritance. Thomas cleared his throat and continued. The foundation will provide legal aid and housing assistance to elderly individuals facing financial exploitation or abuse, with a particular focus on cases involving family members. Brielle's face contorted with fury. This is ridiculous, she exploded. You're just a vindictive old woman who can't stand to see her son happy. Nathan, are you going to let her do this to us? Nathan looked utterly lost, torn between the woman he had just married and the mother who had raised him. I felt a flash of pity for him, caught between worlds, unsure of who to trust. Mrs. Adams, Thomas said coolly, I strongly advise you against making further inflammatory statements. Your assault on Mrs. Whitmore was witnessed by over 100 people. Should she choose to press charges? Press charges? Robert Adams interjected. For a family disagreement? That's absurd. Slapping someone across the face and demanding their property is not a disagreement, Thomas replied. It's assault and attempted coercion. The wedding planner, who had been hovering anxiously at the edges of the confrontation, stepped forward with professional determination. Perhaps we should move this discussion to a private room. But I shook my head. No, they chose to humiliate me. Publicly. They can hear the truth publicly. I moved to stand beside Thomas, finding strength I didn't know I possessed. I won't be pressing charges, Mr. Sinclair. That's not why I asked you here. I faced the crowded room, these strangers and friends who had witnessed my lowest moment. I came here today to celebrate my son's happiness. I still want that for him more than anything. But I will not be bullied, manipulated, or abused by anyone. The apartment in Savannah is my home. It is not for sale, not for transfer, not for discussion. I turned to Nathan directly. I've never asked you to choose between me and Brielle. I only asked for respect. The same respect I've always shown you. Nathan's eyes filled with tears. He started to speak, but Brielle grabbed his arm. Don't, she warned. This is just manipulation. Thomas handed me a final document. This is for you, Nathan. It details the financial support your mother has provided over the past 5 years. Support you believed came from student loans you were repaying, or from your own earnings. Nathan took the paper with a trembling hand. His eyes widened as he read. The monthly subsidies toward his apartment rent in Atlanta, the payments toward his law school debt, his car insurance, even a substantial portion of this very wedding. You said the firm was giving me bonuses, he whispered, looking at Brielle. You said you'd negotiated a special compensation package. Brielle's silence was damning. I hadn't known about that particular lie. The revelation sent a wave of sadness through me. not vindication. I took no pleasure in watching my son's world collapse, in seeing the woman he loved revealed as a deceiver. The foundation is established, I said gently. That can't be changed. But you're still my son, Nathan. That will never change either. With that, I turned and walked toward the ballroom doors for the second time that evening. But this time, there was no stunned silence, no humiliation, burning my cheeks. This time, I carried my dignity with me like a shield. Behind me, I heard Brielle's angry accusations, Nathan's confused responses, the uncomfortable murmurs of guests unsure whether to stay or go. But I kept walking, out into the warm Savannah night, where Joseph waited by his car to drive me home. The slap had shattered more than my glasses. It had shattered illusions, Nathan's, and my own. The day after the wedding dawned with the kind of golden Georgia sunlight that usually lifted my spirits. I sat on my small balcony overlooking the courtyard garden, a cup of tea growing cold beside me. My replacement glasses, an older prescription I'd kept as a spare, pinched slightly at the bridge of my nose. I hadn't slept. How could I? The events at the Magnolia Grand kept replaying. In my mind, Brielle's slap, Nathan's silence, Thomas's intervention, the shocked faces of the guests. I wondered if the newlyweds had stayed for their first dance, cut the elaborate cake, tossed the bouquet. I wondered if they were speaking to each other on what should have been the first morning of their married life. My phone had been silent since I left the reception. No calls from Nathan. No text messages, nothing. I wasn't surprised, just hollow. Around noon, a gentle knock at my door roused me from my thoughts. It was Joseph, his kind face creased with concern, holding a basket of fresh muffins from the bakery down the street. "Thought you might not feel like cooking," he said, following me into the kitchen. "How are you holding up, Grace?" I managed a small smile. "I've been better, but I've been worse too." He set about making fresh coffee while I arranged the muffins on a plate. The simple, ordinary actions were comforting. A reminder that life continued, that routine could be an anchor in emotional storms. "You were magnificent last night," Joseph said, leaning against the counter. "Standing your ground like that." "I don't feel magnificent," I admitted. "I feel sad. For Nathan, mostly. He's starting his marriage with a foundation built on lies." Joseph nodded thoughtfully. "Some lessons can't be taught. They have to be experienced. You did what you needed to do. The rest is up to him." We were finishing our coffee when my phone finally rang. I nearly knocked it off the table in my haste to answer, hoping to hear Nathan's voice. Instead, it was Thomas. "Grace," he said, his professional tone tinged with unusual warmth. "I wanted to check on you. Are you all right?" "I'm managing," I replied. "Any fallout I should know about?" "Several things, actually. First, the Adamses have been making calls, trying to challenge the irrevocable trust. They won't succeed. It's ironclad. But you should expect some legal posturing." I sighed. "And Nathan? Have you heard from him?" A slight hesitation. "Yes. He came to my office this morning. He was distraught, confused. He had a lot of questions about the financial arrangements you've had in place." My heart clenched. "Did you answer them?" "As much as professional ethics allowed. He needs to hear the rest from you, Grace, when you're ready." After we hung up, Joseph insisted on staying, concerned about leaving me alone. We spent the afternoon sorting through old photographs. Nathan as a gap-toothed kindergartner, as a serious middle schooler with his science fair project, as a proud high school graduate with his arm around my shoulders. In every image, the connection between us was palpable. What had happened to that bond? Evening brought another unexpected visitor. I opened the door to find Marianne Carter, one of my oldest friends and Nathan's godmother, standing there with a determined expression. "I left as soon as that awful scene happened," she explained, hugging me fiercely. "But I've been hearing things, Grace. The Atlanta crowd is spinning quite a tale." I invited her in, steeling myself. "What are they saying?" Marianne rolled her eyes. "That you're senile, that you've been hoarding wealth while pretending to be poor, that you deliberately sabotaged the wedding because you're jealous of Brielle." Despite everything, I laughed. A short, sharp sound that surprised us both. "Senile at 56? That's a new one." "It's absurd," Marianne agreed, settling onto my sofa. "But Brielle's family has influence in certain circles. They're trying to control the narrative." "Let them," I said, surprising myself with how little I cared. "People who know me won't believe it. People who don't, well, their opinion hardly matters." Marianne studied me with new respect. "You've changed, Grace. There's a strength in you that wasn't there before. Perhaps she was right. The path to that ballroom confrontation had been paved with small surrenders, accommodating Brielle's rudeness, overlooking Nathan's growing distance, making excuses for behavior that should have raised red flags. Each concession had diminished me slightly, eroded my self-respect in nearly imperceptible increments. Until the slap, that public humiliation, witnessed by friends, family, and strangers alike, had paradoxically restored something essential within me. A boundary, a certainty, a reclamation of my own worth. The next morning, I woke to a text message from an unknown number. This isn't over. No signature, but the threat was clear enough. I showed it to Thomas, who added it to what he called the evidence file he was maintaining. 3 days after the wedding, a certified letter arrived from a prestigious Atlanta law firm representing the Adamses. It contained vague allegations of financial impropriety and elder competency issues, ending with a demand that I submit to a psychological evaluation before making any further financial decisions. Thomas responded with surgical precision, dismantling their claims point by point. He attached documentation of my recent clean bill of health, cognitive assessment scores that would put many younger people to shame, and a carefully worded warning about defamation. They're fishing, he assured me over the phone, looking for any weakness they can exploit. The trust is secure, Grace. Your home is secure. A week passed, then 2. The text messages continued, always from different numbers, always vague but menacing. I changed my phone number and informed the local police, who were sympathetic but limited in what they could do. Still, nothing. From Nathan. I tried to resume my normal routines, volunteer work at the elementary school, coffee with friends, tending to my courtyard garden, but his absence was a constant ache, a phantom limb I couldn't stop feeling. 18 days after the wedding, as I was deadheading roses in the late afternoon sun, the garden gate creaked open. I turned, pruning shears in hand, to find Nathan standing there. He looked terrible. Unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, wearing a wrinkled polo shirt and jeans that hung loosely on his frame. "Mom," he said simply, his voice cracking on that single syllable. I set down the shears carefully, buying time, trying to control the surge of emotions that threatened to overwhelm me. Love, hurt, hope, caution. "Nathan," I responded, neither advancing nor retreating. "I wasn't sure I'd see you again." He moved toward the small wrought iron table where I often took my morning coffee. "Can we talk, please?" I nodded, removing my gardening gloves as I joined him. Up close, he looked even worse. His eyes bloodshot, his complexion sallow. "I've left Brielle," he said without preamble. "Or she left me. It depends on who's telling the story, I guess." I waited, sensing there was more. He rubbed his hands over his face, a gesture so reminiscent of his father that my heart constricted. "Everything fell apart after you left the reception," he continued. "Her parents were furious. She was screaming about being humiliated, about losing the apartment she'd already promised to her interior designer friend. We barely spoke on the flight to our honeymoon. 2 days in, she flew back to Atlanta. "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. Whatever Brielle had done, I took no joy in my son's pain. He gave a hollow laugh. "Don't be. The thing is, Mom, after you left and Thomas explained everything, I started asking questions. The answers weren't pretty." "What kind of questions?" I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. Nathan's eyes met mine. Shame and realization mingling in their depths. "About the money. About why Brielle was so fixated on your apartment. About why her parents suddenly treated me differently after the wedding." He pulled out his phone and handed it to me. On the screen was a text message conversation between Brielle and someone saved as Mom. My stomach turned as I read, "Brielle, it's worse than we thought. Grace has transferred everything to some foundation. Nathan gets nothing. Mom, what about the Savannah property? That's the real prize. Brielle, locked up tight. Her lawyer is thorough. Mom, then what's the point? Dad didn't finance this wedding for a son-in-law with no inheritance and student debt. Brielle, trust me, I'm as furious as you are, working on a new plan." I handed the phone back, a strange calm settling over me. "When did you see this?" 3 days into our honeymoon in St. Lucia. She left her phone when she went for a swim. I shouldn't have looked, but something about how Thomas described the financial support you'd been giving me, support I never knew about, it made me suspicious. Nathan ran a hand through his disheveled hair. I confronted her. She denied it at first, then said I was twisting things. When I wouldn't let it go, She packed her bags and left. Said I was choosing you over her, that I always had. A hummingbird darted into the garden, hovering near the feeder I kept filled all summer. We both watched it in silence, this tiny creature so focused on its purpose. Why didn't you tell me about the money, Mom? The investments. All those years of working multiple jobs. Living so frugally. Was it all an act? The hurt in his voice stung, but I understood it. I'd kept significant secrets from my only child, with consequences neither of us could have foreseen. It wasn't an act, I said carefully. It was a choice. Your father and I agreed, before he died, that we wanted you to grow up valuing the right things. The life insurance was substantial, and James had made some incredibly lucky early investments in tech companies. When those took off, I had decisions to make. I leaned forward, willing him to understand. I could have moved us to a bigger house, bought luxury cars, sent you to private school, but I saw what inherited wealth did to some of the children I taught. The entitlement, the lack of motivation, the emptiness when nothing is earned. Nathan's expression softened slightly. So you deliberately hid our financial situation? I didn't hide it exactly. I just didn't emphasize it. The money was invested, growing, secured for your future. Meanwhile, we lived within the means of my teaching salary. I wanted you to develop a strong work ethic, to know the satisfaction of earning your own success. But you were secretly paying for things, my apartment, my student loans, even the wedding. I sighed. That evolved gradually. When you started law school, I intended to help openly, but you were so proud, so determined to make it on your own. You refused my offers, so I found quieter ways to support you, to ease your burdens without wounding your pride. Nathan absorbed this, his brow furrowed in concentration. And Brielle knew? About the money? Not from me, I said firmly. But she, or her family, must have done some investigating. The foundation isn't exactly secret, though it wasn't publicized either. The Whitmore name is on some donor lists for charities in Savannah. He nodded slowly. Her father has connections everywhere. Banking, real estate, legal circles. Once they identified a potential target, they probably dug deeper. The clinical way he described it, a target, made my skin crawl. How calculating the entire relationship had been. I reached across the table and took his hand. I'm so sorry, Nathan. I never meant for my decisions to make you vulnerable. I thought I was protecting you. His fingers tightened around mine. No, Mom. I'm the one who's sorry. I let her change me. I stood there while she disrespected you, manipulated you, even assaulted you. I didn't say a word. Tears welled in his eyes. The worst part is, I think I knew. Deep down, I sensed something was wrong with how she treated you, with her sudden interest in your apartment. But I ignored my instincts because I wanted to believe she loved me for me. The raw pain in his voice broke my heart. I moved around the table and pulled him into an embrace. He collapsed against me, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I held my grown son as I had when he was a little boy frightened by thunderstorms. Steady, present, unconditional. When he finally pulled back, wiping his eyes with the heel of his hand, I saw a flicker of the Nathan I knew. The true Nathan, not the hollow-eyed stranger who had been standing beside Brielle at the wedding. What now? I asked gently. Divorce, he said without hesitation. It's already in process. Her father's lawyers are demanding back the portion of the wedding you paid for, plus emotional damages for the public humiliation. I couldn't help it, I laughed. They want me to pay them for emotional damages after Brielle slapped me in public? That's creative. A ghost of a smile touched Nathan's lips. Thomas said something similar, but with more legal terminology. He's handling it. The mention of Thomas reminded me of another issue. And the foundation? How do you feel about that? Nathan's expression grew serious again. At first, I was hurt. It felt like you didn't trust me with the inheritance. But after seeing Brielle's true colors, after realizing how easily I was manipulated, maybe it was the right call. He took a deep breath. I want to help, Mom. With the foundation. Not for the money, I don't need or want that. But because it matters. After what I've witnessed, I understand why you created it. Something loosened in my chest. A knot of worry I'd been carrying since Thomas announced the foundation's creation at the wedding. I hadn't established it to punish Nathan, but to protect vulnerable elderly individuals from the kind of exploitation Brielle and her family had attempted. That my son now wanted to be part of this mission felt like healing beginning. The foundation would be lucky to have you, I said sincerely. But first, you need to take care of yourself. You look exhausted, sweetheart. He glanced down at his rumpled clothes and gave a Rueful smile. I've been sleeping on a friend's couch in Atlanta. Brielle's still in her apartment. Most of my things are there. Without hesitation, I stood up. Your room is exactly as you left it. Stay as long as you need. For the first time since he'd arrived, Nathan's smile reached his eyes. Thanks, Mom. Just for a little while, until I figure things out. As we walked into the apartment together, the familiar rhythm of our footsteps on the hardwood floors felt like coming home in more ways than one. Nathan paused in the hallway, looking at the family photos that lined the wall, a visual timeline of our life together. I forgot how much history is in this place, he said quietly. How many memories. I touched his arm gently. That's what Brielle never understood. This isn't just real estate. It's our story. Nathan nodded, understanding dawning in his eyes. And that's what makes it priceless. Nathan stayed for 2 weeks. At first, he slept almost constantly, his body and mind exhausted from the stress of the failed marriage and its aftermath. I let him rest, checking on him occasionally, leaving food outside his door when he didn't emerge for meals. Gradually, he began to resurface. He joined me for breakfast one morning, then accompanied me to the farmer's market the next day. We fell into an easy routine reminiscent of his college breaks, comfortable silences, shared meals, evening walks through the historic district. One night over dinner, he asked about the foundation. How does it work exactly? What's its mission? I explained the structure Thomas and I had created, an organization dedicated to providing legal aid, financial counseling, and housing assistance to elderly individuals facing exploitation or abuse. We're particularly focused on cases involving family members, I said, refilling our water glasses. Financial elder abuse is far more common than most people realize, and it's often perpetrated by those closest to the victim. Nathan nodded thoughtfully. Like what the Adamses tried to do to you. Yes, though I was fortunate. I had resources, education, support from people like Thomas and Joseph. Many seniors don't. They're isolated, sometimes confused, and deeply vulnerable to manipulation by family members who see them as obstacles to inheritance rather than human beings deserving of dignity. As I spoke, I could see something awakening in Nathan, a sense of purpose, perhaps, or a way to channel his remorse into meaningful action. I could help with the legal side, he said, leaning forward eagerly. Pro bono representation for seniors who can't afford attorneys. Maybe educational workshops on estate planning, power of attorney, advanced directives, all the things people should understand before they're in crisis. His enthusiasm was infectious. That would be wonderful. The foundation has funding, but it needs passionate people to fulfill its mission. Over the next few days, Nathan spent hours on his laptop, researching elder law, contacting former law school professors who specialized in the field, drafting proposals for the foundation's legal aid program. I watched him transform before my eyes, the pallor fading from his skin, the spark returning to his gaze, his posture straightening as if a heavy weight had been lifted from his shoulders. But the outside world continued to intrude. Certified letters arrived regularly from Brielle's attorneys, each more aggressive than the last. Nathan would read them, sigh heavily, and forward them to Thomas without comment. 3 weeks after Nathan's return, Thomas called with an update. The Adamses are getting desperate, he reported. Their latest filing alleges that Nathan was unduly influenced to leave the marriage. They're claiming that you manipulated him emotionally during a vulnerable period. Nathan, listening on speakerphone, shook his head in disbelief. That's ridiculous. I have the text messages, proving their scheme. Which is why they'll never take this to court, Thomas replied confidently. They know they'd lose. This is about pressure, about wearing you both down until you agree to some kind of settlement. What do they want? I asked. Money, primarily. And for the foundation to be dissolved. Nathan's expression hardened. Not happening. Absolutely not. I agreed. Thomas chuckled. That's what I told them, in more formal language. I also mentioned that if they continue with frivolous filings, we'll countersue for harassment and legal fees. After the call ended, Nathan paced the living room, agitated in a way I hadn't seen since his arrival. I feel like I'm in limbo, he admitted. I can't move forward with my life until this divorce is finalized, but they're dragging it out deliberately. I watched him, concern growing. Maybe you need a change of scenery, a fresh perspective. He stopped pacing. What do you mean? The foundation has connections with a legal aid organization in Charleston. They've been asking for someone to help set up an elder justice program there. It would be temporary, 3 months, maybe 6. but it would get you out of Atlanta, away from the Adamses' sphere of influence. Nathan considered this, rubbing the back of his neck. Charleston, it's not far from here. Less than 2 hours. You could come back on weekends if you wanted. A slow smile spread across his face. The first genuine, untroubled smile I'd seen in months. I think that might be perfect, Mom. 2 days later, he drove to Charleston for an interview. He called that evening, excited and animated, to report that they'd offered him the position on the spot. He would start in 2 weeks, living in a small apartment provided by the organization until he found his own place. The morning Nathan left for Charleston dawned clear and bright, a perfect September day. I helped him load his modest belongings into his car, my heart both heavy and light, sad to see him go, but hopeful about this new beginning. As he hugged me goodbye, he whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me." "Never," I promised. "Not in a million years." I watched his car disappear down the tree-lined street, remembering all the times I'd watched him leave before. First day of kindergarten, summer camp, college, law school. Each departure had felt like a small heartbreak. This one felt like a restoration. With Nathan settled in Charleston, I turned my attention fully to the foundation. Thomas had assembled a board of directors, respected professionals in elder law, social work, and finance. Our first official meeting was scheduled for October, and I threw myself into the preparations, drafting mission statements, organizational structures, and funding priorities. Joseph became my sounding board and most enthusiastic supporter. He attended community meetings with me, offered his home for small gatherings, and introduced me to his wide network of friends and former colleagues who might contribute to the cause. "You've found your calling, Grace," he remarked one evening as we walked along Forsyth Park. "I've never seen you so energized." I had to agree. There was a sense of purpose in my days now, a feeling that my experiences, painful as they had been, could be transformed into something meaningful for others. The texts from unknown numbers had stopped. The certified letters came less frequently. Life was settling into a new rhythm, different but satisfying. Until the day Brielle appeared at my door. I hadn't seen her since the wedding, hadn't heard her voice, since that awful slap. Now she stood on my doorstep, immaculately dressed in a cream pantsuit, her hair and makeup flawless as always. But something had changed in her expression. The cold calculation replaced by something more desperate. "We need to talk," she said without greeting. "May I come in?" Every instinct warned against allowing her into my home. I stepped onto the porch instead, closing the door behind me. "I think we've said everything that needs saying, Brielle." She flinched slightly at my calm refusal. "Please, Grace, I'm not here to cause problems. Things have changed." "In what way?" She glanced around nervously, lowering her voice. "My father's business is in trouble. Serious trouble. The wedding expenses, the legal fees. It's all been too much. We're facing bankruptcy." I regarded her skeptically. "And this concerns me how? If you would just agree to dissolve the foundation, release some of the funds to Nathan, to us, we could settle everything quietly. No more lawyers, no more conflict." The audacity was breathtaking. Even now, facing financial ruin, she was still scheming, still seeing me as a resource to be exploited rather than a person deserving of respect. "The foundation stays," I said firmly. "And Nathan has made his choice clear. There is no us for you anymore, Brielle." Her composed facade cracked. "You've ruined everything. My parents will lose their house, their social standing, all because you couldn't accept that Nathan had moved on with his life." I stood my ground, unmoved by her outburst. "Your parents' financial problems are not my concern. Neither are yours. Please don't come here again." As I turned to go back inside, she grabbed my arm. "This isn't over, Grace." I looked pointedly at her hand until she released me. "Yes, Brielle, it is." I went inside and locked the door, hands trembling slightly as I called Thomas to report the encounter. Then I texted Nathan, warning him that Brielle might try to contact him next. His response was immediate and reassuring. "I'm done with that chapter of my life. Stay safe, Mom. I love you." 3 simple words that meant everything. I love you. After all we'd been through, those words felt like victory. 6 months after Nathan moved to Charleston, the James Whitmore Foundation for Dignity in Aging held its official launch event. We chose a beautiful venue overlooking the Savannah River, with floor-to-ceiling windows that captured the golden late afternoon light. Over 200 people attended. Social workers, attorneys, healthcare professionals, community leaders, and seniors who had already benefited from our pilot programs. I stood at the podium, surveying the crowd with a mixture of pride and disbelief. How had this journey, which began with a humiliating slap at my son's wedding, led to something so meaningful? Thank you all for coming, I began. The foundation exists because of a simple belief that every person deserves to age with dignity, security, and respect. Too many seniors face exploitation from the very people who should protect them. Family members who see them as obstacles to inheritance rather than human beings with autonomy and worth. From the corner of my eye, I could see Nathan in the front row, nodding encouragingly. He had driven down from Charleston for the event, looking healthier and more centered than I had seen him in years. Beside him sat Joseph, whose friendship had been my anchor throughout this transformation. In just 6 months, I continued, we've provided legal representation to 37 seniors facing financial exploitation. We've helped 15 elderly homeowners secure their property rights against predatory family members. We've conducted workshops on estate planning for over 200 participants. The room broke into applause. I smiled, waiting for it to subside before introducing our keynote speaker, a renowned expert in elder law who had joined our board of directors. As I stepped away from the microphone, a movement at the back of the room caught my attention. Brielle's father, Robert Adams, was slipping into the reception. He looked diminished somehow, his expensive suit slightly rumpled, his confident posture replaced by something more hesitant. Our eyes met briefly before he looked away. I found Nathan during the reception that followed. Did you see who's here? I asked, quietly. He nodded, his expression unreadable. Thomas mentioned the Adamses' investment firm declared bankruptcy last month. There's talk of an SEC investigation. Should we ask him to leave? Nathan considered this, then shook his head. No. Let him see what we've built. Let him understand what he tried to destroy. The event continued, a steady stream of well-wishers and supporters approaching to congratulate us. I was deep in conversation with a social worker when I felt a presence at my elbow. Robert Adams stood there, looking uncomfortable but determined. Mrs. Whitmore, he said formally. Might I have a word? Nathan materialized at my side instantly, protective. Is that necessary? I placed a calming hand on my son's arm. It's all right. I'll speak with Mr. Adams. We moved to a quieter corner of the room. Up close, the changes in Robert were even more apparent. New lines around his eyes, a certain hollowness in his cheeks. I won't take much of your time, he said. I needed to say something. I waited, giving him neither encouragement nor discouragement. What you've created here, he gestured around the room, it's remarkable. And I owe you an apology for how my family behaved. For how I behaved. The words seemed to cost him significant effort. I studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or hidden agenda, but found only weary resignation. Where is Brielle now? I asked. California. After the divorce and the bankruptcy, she moved to Los Angeles. She's trying to rebuild her marketing career there. He hesitated. We don't speak much these days. The admission carried a weight of sadness I hadn't expected to feel for this man. Despite everything, he was a father who had lost connection with his child, a pain I understood all too well. I'm sorry to hear that, I said sincerely. Robert looked surprised by my response. You're a better person than I would be in your position, Mrs. Whitmore. Not better, I corrected gently. Just clear about what matters, and holding grudges doesn't make the list. He nodded slowly, then reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew an envelope. This is for the foundation. It's not much, not compared to what we once had, but I want to contribute. I accepted the envelope with a simple, thank you, neither dismissing his gesture nor overstating its significance. Robert glanced across the room, to where Nathan was chatting with board members. He seems well. He is, I agreed. The work in Charleston suits him. He's finding his way. A flicker of something, regret, perhaps, crossed Robert's face. I hope my daughter finds her way too. As he turned to leave, I found myself saying, People can change, Mr. Adams. I've seen it happen. He gave me a sad smile. Perhaps. But some bridges can't be rebuilt once they're burned. I watched him walk away, disappearing into the evening crowd outside. The encounter left me with complicated feelings. Not forgiveness, exactly, but a certain peace. The Adamses no longer held power over my family, neither through fear nor through hatred. Later that night, after the guests had departed and we were cleaning up, Nathan approached me with a curious expression. What did Robert Adams want? I showed him the envelope, which contained a check for $5,000, a modest donation by our foundation standards, but significant given the Adamses' financial collapse. Nathan looked stunned. I didn't expect that. Neither did I admitted. But people can surprise you. Sometimes badly, sometimes well. He helped me stack the last of the chairs, then paused, leaning against the wall with a thoughtful expression. You know, I ran into my former boss yesterday. The firm wants me back in Atlanta. My heart skipped a beat. Are you considering it? I was, briefly. Better salary, prestige, all the things I used to think mattered. He smiled. But I'm declining. The work I'm doing in Charleston means something. I'm helping people who really need it, not just corporations trying to increase their profit margins. Pride swelled in my chest. This was the son I had raised, compassionate, thoughtful, valuing purpose over status. Besides, he continued with a grin, I've met someone. Her name is Eliza. She's a pediatric nurse at the hospital near my apartment. Nothing serious yet, but I'd like you to meet her sometime. That too, I said, trying not to sound too eager. As we walked out to the parking lot, Nathan draped his arm around my shoulders, a gesture so natural, so reminiscent of simpler times that my eyes misted over. We're going to be okay, aren't we, Mom? He said, gazing up at the star-filled Savannah sky. I leaned into his embrace, feeling the solid strength of the man he had become. Yes, I replied, with absolute certainty. We already are. 1 year to the day after the disastrous wedding, I sat in my courtyard garden with a cup of tea, watching golden autumn light filter through the oak trees. The anniversary had arrived without fanfare, yet the date hadn't escaped my notice. A full cycle of seasons had passed since that slap echoed through the Magnolia Grand Ballroom. So much had changed. The foundation was thriving, expanding its services to neighboring counties. Nathan had been promoted to Director of Legal Services at the Charleston organization, his expertise in elder law growing alongside his confidence. His relationship with Eliza had deepened. She was warm, genuine, and treated me with a natural respect that required no effort. As for me, I had found a new rhythm to my days. 3 days a week at the foundation offices, weekends often spent visiting Nathan in Charleston, or welcoming him and Eliza to Savannah. I had started teaching again, not elementary school this time, but workshops for seniors on financial literacy and self-advocacy. Joseph and I had grown closer as well. Our friendship had evolved gradually into something more, a gentle companionship filled with shared interests, mutual respect, and easy laughter. At our age, we felt no need to rush or label what we had. We simply enjoyed each other's presence, grateful for the unexpected gift of connection. The sound of the garden gate opening pulled me from my reflections. Nathan appeared earlier than expected for our planned dinner. Hope I'm not interrupting, he said, bending to kiss my cheek before settling into the chair beside me. Never, I assured him, though I wasn't expecting you until 6. Is everything all right? He nodded, reaching into his messenger bag. I wanted to show you something before dinner. It arrived at the office today. He handed me a glossy magazine, a national publication focused on social justice issues. On the cover was a familiar face. Mine. The headline read, Grace Whitmore, Turning Personal Trauma into Public Good. I stared at it in disbelief. How did this happen? Remember that journalist who interviewed you at the conference in Atlanta last month? She was so moved by your story, by what you've built. The article is incredible, Mom. It's already generating donations and inquiries from other states about replicating our model. I flipped through the pages with trembling hands, scanning the article. It told the story of the foundation's creation, including the wedding incident, but focused primarily on the work we were doing now, the lives we were changing, the systems we were challenging. They didn't contact Brielle, did they? I asked, suddenly concerned. No, Nathan reassured me. The journalist was respectful of all parties. She focused on the mission, not the drama. I closed the magazine, oddly emotional. It feels strange, seeing our private pain made so public. But that's the point, isn't it? Nathan said gently. What happened to you isn't unique. Elder abuse happens behind closed doors every day. Your willingness to share your story is helping others recognize and resist similar situations. He was right. Of course. Every week I received letters and emails from seniors who had found the courage to stand up to exploitative family members after learning about the foundation. Some had attended our workshops. Others had simply read about our work. Each story reinforced the importance of breaking the silence around elder abuse. There's something else, Nathan said, his expression growing serious. Heard from Brielle yesterday. My heart stuttered. What did she want? To apologize, apparently. She sent a letter to my office in Charleston. He pulled an envelope from his bag. I haven't opened it. I wasn't sure I wanted to. I studied my son's face, seeing the conflict there. And now? He sighed. I think I need closure. Real closure, not just distance and silence. Would you like, privacy? I offered, starting to rise. No, he said quickly. Stay, please. Whatever she has to say, I'd rather not face it alone. Nathan opened the envelope carefully and unfolded several pages of handwritten text. He read silently, his expression changing subtly as he progressed through the letter. When he finished, he handed it to me without comment. The handwriting was unmistakably Brielle's, elegant, controlled, with perfect spacing. But the words themselves revealed a person I hadn't seen before. Nathan. I've written this letter many times in my mind over the past year, never finding the right words. Perhaps there are no right words for the wrongs I've done. I want to apologize, to you and to your mother. My behavior was inexcusable. The public humiliation I caused, the pain I inflicted, the manipulation and lies, all of it reflects a person I no longer wish to be. The bankruptcy and divorce forced me to confront uncomfortable truths about myself and my upbringing. In Los Angeles, with no family connections or wealth to fall back on, I've had to build a life based on my own merit. It's been humbling and ultimately transformative. I saw the article about your mother's foundation. The work you're both doing is remarkable. In a strange way, I'm grateful that my terrible actions led to something so positive in the world. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even expect a response to this letter. I simply needed you both to know that I understand the damage I caused, and I am deeply sorry. Brielle. I refolded the letter slowly, processing its contents. Do you believe her? I asked finally. Nathan considered the question. I think I do. Not that it changes anything between us, but yes. Loss has a way of clarifying what matters. We sat in thoughtful silence as the garden filled with evening shadows. Joseph would be arriving soon for our dinner plans, bringing his famous peach cobbler for dessert. Eliza would join us after her hospital shift ended. Our small, reconstructed family gathering. Will you respond? I asked. Nathan ran a hand through his hair, that familiar gesture that reminded me so much of his father. I think so. Not to reconnect, but to acknowledge her apology, to close that chapter properly. I reached over and squeezed his hand. You have a generous heart, Nathan. You always have. He smiled, a touch of sadness in his eyes. I learned from the best. You never became bitter, even when you had every right to be. As the sun began to set, casting long golden rays across the courtyard, I thought about the journey of the past year, from humiliation to healing, from betrayal to rebuilding. The path hadn't been easy, but it had led us somewhere true. Joseph arrived, his warm presence filling the garden as he greeted Nathan, with a hearty handshake and me with a gentle kiss. Eliza followed shortly after, bringing fresh flowers and stories from her day at the hospital. We moved inside for dinner, the apartment filled with conversation and laughter. Midway through the meal, Nathan raised his glass. I'd like to propose a toast to unexpected beginnings, to resilience, added Eliza, lifting her glass. To second chances, Joseph said, smiling at me. I raised my own glass, looking around at these beloved faces. To dignity, I said softly. The dignity of truth. Later that night, after our guests had departed and I was preparing for bed, I paused at my dresser where the framed magazine cover now stood. My reflected gaze met my own, the eyes of a woman who had been publicly humiliated, yet found the strength to walk away with her head held high. A woman who had transformed pain into purpose. I thought of Brielle's letter, of Robert's donation, of the many ways life circles back upon itself, offering opportunities for redemption to those willing to embrace them. My phone chimed with a text message from Nathan. Thank you for everything, Mom. I love you. 3 simple words that contained multitudes. Love you. After all we'd endured, those words felt like the truest victory. Not over enemies, but over bitterness, over fear, over the temptation to let pain define us. I typed back, I love you too. Always have. Always will. As I switched off the light, a sense of peace settled over me. The slap that had echoed through that ballroom a year ago had indeed changed everything, but not in the way Brielle had intended. Instead of breaking me, it had awakened me. Instead of diminishing me, it had revealed my strength. Some might have chosen revenge. I had chosen dignity. And in that choice, I had found something far more powerful than any inheritance, any property, any social status. I had found myself,